Hello. G'day, Owen here with a startling departure from my usual content. Those of you who've watched the War Trakks episode may have seen this little fella here. This is a first edition Rogue Trader Warhammer 40,000 work in progress at the moment Ork War Trakk. Circa 1987-ish, maybe? Somewhere between 87 and 90, I think. This was the current model when I started playing 40k in about 97. I don't think I ever saw one in the shops, but they were technically still around. A little bit later, obviously, the Gorka Morka plastic got released, and that's the current one even now. But why do I suddenly have this? Well, therein lies a tale. Some time ago, my esteemed opponent, Mad Juzzy the Flautist, rang me up and said that he didn't think he was ever going to finish his Ork army and that he was going to give it to me, which was nice, and he has been rightly rewarded. And amongst this army was a collection of old metal stuff that his brother-in-law found at a cash converters. He paid, I think, $35 for it, and there was an entire first edition Ork army in there, including some things I've never seen before, like the original plastic multi-part Orks. Yeah, let's have a look at some stuff. Bamf! Okay, so this is the first unit I've painted. They're not absolutely completed yet. They are very, very close. From memory, about the only thing that has to be done is this guy needs a little bit of touch-up on... Might be a bit hard to see, but that's actually like a searchlight mount on his shoulder. That needs a bit of touch-up. And I want to actually freehand some designs on the shoulder pads of definitely him and probably him as well. What are these, you might be asking? You might well be asking that. They're a lot smaller than their modern equivalent. These are knobs in Mega Armour. And yes, those are 25mm bases. They are rather small. Ork stuff used to be a lot smaller than it is today. Technically, I think he's actually in heavy armour, not Mega Armour, but he was the only figure that was designated that way. I had a bit of a look on Stuff of Legends to see exactly when these guys were from. So this block of guys here are slightly later models, 89, 90, something like that. He's from about 87, the first Ork releases. Just give them a bit of a spin there. Obviously much smaller than the modern Mega Armour, but I quite like the style of these guys. One little odd note, he's actually got a Chaos Star on his shoulder. Orks used to have worshipping of Chaos. I've also seen some Khorne markings on really old Orks when I was looking around. Mixed weapon fits, one of them plasma gun there. Back in 1st and 2nd edition, Orks actually just used Imperial weapon rules, so they had bolters and plasma guns and things like that. A few of them have got power claws. In fact, I think 3 power fists, one guy that's more of a claw on that one. He's just holding a gun, so no close combat weapon. Rather fond of these chaps. And I decided, because they were so vintage, they obviously don't fit my new style Waaagh Snaggletooth, so I decided to paint all of the old stuff up as its own army in very bright vintage style. The skin's much brighter than I'd usually use. Also really bright bases and so forth. So this is the beginnings of Waaagh Gruntblasta. So called because one of the models, which I'm not going to show because it's not painted, is the fantastic early 90s Warboss on Super Sideboard that I always desperately wanted as a callow and gormless youth. Well, now I have it as a callow and gormless adult. There's some other things as well that I've got. These are the only ones who are really close to finish, but I've got some other work in progress stuff to share with you. Bamf! Also reframe. So this is the second batch of things I started working on. Not as close to completed as the Mega Knobs. Relatively close, but not based or anything yet. Bit more work to go here. Basically just the metals and then a lot of sort of touch up and detail. Also yellow areas haven't been highlighted or shaded yet, that kind of thing. Bit of a mixed bag here. There were some metal Orks in there. Some of them are specialists, some of them are just plain sort of orcs. So what we've got here is we've got a pain boy, we've got a weird boy, we've got a runt herd, rather a flamboyant runt herd. I often think he looks a bit more like he should be a weird boy, but he is a runt herd. Just a standard orc there. And these two guys back here are actually the same figure. These old figures came with separate arms and guns. They're actually meant to be minders for the weird boy. So in the old rules, the weird boy was always accompanied by a couple of minders who followed him around and made sure his head didn't explode or things like that. I haven't really played the more recent editions before 8th edition, so I'm not sure if that still happens. It was in the rules in 2nd edition. I think it disappeared in 3rd. It may have made a comeback, I'm not sure. So these two guys are actually identical, but I've given them different arms. He's actually got guns taken from Space Crusade. Another friend had a Space Crusade set, and I managed to get the Orks out of that some time ago. Quite a long time ago, actually. It's probably around maybe even 20 years ago. And I've given him some of those because I was pretty low on guns. And this guy here has one of the more conventional old bolters. So let's give these chaps a bit of a spin there. As you can see, orcs were much more comedic looking in the older editions. Nowhere near as brutal and vicious as they look now. Smaller, considerably smaller. And this plastic interchangeable arms thing they had going on meant that they all were wearing the same t-shirts no matter what. And they all ended up armed with the same guns and swords and things, bamf, as dictated by tradition. So, back to the war track. Back in 1st edition, when this war track was originally released, it actually came as part of a set. So there was the basic war track, this one. There was the war track Scorcher, which came with the turret for the flamethrower and the trailer for the fuel that dragged along behind it. To make sure that the two sets were about the same price, I'm assuming they were the same price, I haven't really checked, this is going back kind of before I was playing. The standard war track actually came with an artillery piece and a crew for the artillery piece. He's the Ork bully from the gun crew. These two grots are actually not from that blister. They weren't included in the stuff. These are vintage grots, but they are not the actual crew for the cannon. Let's give this a bit of a spin while we talk. So we have the cannon there, just some sort of heavy boltery looking thing. I don't know actually what it counted as. Also interestingly, the war track looks like it's armed with a las cannon of all things. So yeah, this was the only artillery piece that Orks had back in the day, and you had to buy a war track to get it. So I'm painting these guys up at the moment. The artillery piece is completely finished. The war track is fairly finished. The crew are also fairly finished. They should be done pretty soon. I'll be able to do some more updates. Now there's a whole lot of other interesting stuff which you'll be seeing in videos to come that go into Waaagh Gruntblasta. But for the moment, I'll leave you with an image of everything that's painted so far.